She was dressed in the uniform, displayed her ID and complied with all regulations. Thus why did two policemen still force her into handcuffs? The response cost them everything. There was nothing out of the ordinary about the road. Outside of Gahanna, Ohio, it was just after 7:30 in the morning. A mang and the air's coolness hadn't completely dissipated. Sergeant Tamika Drury has already traveled that route 100 times. She was familiar with every bend, each pothole, all the shabby road signs that led out of her neighborhood, and in the direction of the highway, her dark green, 2014, the Toyota RAV4's fuel was running low. She was still not eating. Thus she reasoned, she would pick up a little item at the station, before proceeding to Whitehall's reserve base. Weekend of drills. She didn't detest it, but she also didn't adore it. She lived with it. Her cadence on Morse Road, she pulled into the Sinclair station, nestled behind a row of closed establishments, and a Dollar General, not exactly the town's most pleasant area, although not at all the worst. Tamika wore a uniform. Pressed fatigues, tight-tied boots. She wore her rank and name patch over her chest with pride. In the rear seat her duffel bag was sitting erect, packed her field gear the previous evening. As she went outside, she gave it a quick glance, experiencing the same discipline-related pull. For the previous 12 years, she had carried her entire life was not in the Army Reserve. However, it kept her rooted. Slipping her card into the pump, and chose to use her phone's standard unleaded option, buzzed a note from her mother. Tamika grinned as she checked in. Prior to a drill, always she typed a quick response while muttering, then a protein bar was opened, and nibbled as the petrol filled her tank. The white Chevy Tahoe escaped her notice. Bring in 2 pumps over. Not immediately within the SUV. 2 police officers in uniform from a nearby suburb were seated, a taller younger person with buzzing hair, the other older, quieter and heavier, behind mirrored shade. The younger one indicated, when Tamika said something. The elder man shrugged. Tamika was reinstalling the nozzle, when the initial voice yelled, "Excuse me, ma'am." She became an officer. "Would you mind moving away from the car?" She blinked in confusion. "Is something amiss? Can you do that right now?" There was something in his tone when he snapped, not only power. However, suspicion caused her stomach to tighten. However, she took a step back. Hands on display, the senior officer exited and stood apart, saying nothing. The younger one came up straight. "You have identification on you." Naturally reaching cautiously into her uniform pocket, Tamika said, "I'm going to the base. I am a reserve in the Army." She used one hand to hold out her military ID, along with her driver's license. The officer gave them a quick look, hardly noticing, "It's not a costume, this uniform." Quietly, she added, "He said." "Who said it was?" Without moving, "Received a call regarding a loiterer, and behaving shadily, simply doing out our duties." Tamika remained silent. Her gaze shifted to the senior cop. He hadn't spoken anything yet. "I just watched you to make sure this is real," the young one inquired. "I apologize." "You heard me." She let out a deep exhale. "You believe I'm posing as a member of the military?" He didn't respond. Rather, he moved closer. "Turn around." Tamika blinked. "Are you holding me up?" he said. "I'm giving you a legitimate command, ma'am. Turn your hands behind your back." She glanced at the senior officer once again in search of an explanation, but he gave one nod, not in a sympathetic manner, merely to indicate compliance. Before turning, she tightened her hands. "This is an error. It's going to cost you," she said. Cuffs clicked tight and her hands were wrenched back. She winced because it was very tight, yet failed to provide him with the gratification of a response. Someone shouted, "Hey, what's she even doing?" across the lot. "That's a soldier." The younger officer cocked his head in frustration. "Get away." However, Tamika didn't consider the swarming mob, or her uniform's eyes. Her thoughts were already focused on the call. She was going to leave the cruiser. The police cruiser's rear seat sweat and old vinyl were the smells. The door slammed, closed behind her, with a cold finality to force her wrists to sit up. Behind her, still in handcuffs, she was breathing steadily. However, her jaw tightened. She had a half-twisted name tag, based on how they had seized her. She gazed out the window, observing as the younger cop stalked around her car, as though he had just solved a case. The elder remained close to the cruiser, crossed arms and eyes looking around the petrol station as though he found the entire thing boring. Tamika's voice was loud sufficient to be heard over the tiny gap in the barrier made of plexiglass. "I would like to give my commanding officer a call." The young one did not turn around. "At the station, you will receive your phone call. This isn't how it works." She gave a firm response. "I can get in touch with my base, thanks to this uniform." Immediately when detained, he finally turned. "You're being held under suspicion of impersonating military personnel. That's a federal offense. Sit tight." Tamika didn't flinch. "I'm not going to sit here while you pretend this isn't racial profiling," he smirked. "No one said anything about race, lady. We got a call, we responded." She leaned forward. "You looked at my ID, you saw my license. My tags are in the window. You ignored all of that and cuffed me anyway." Why? He stared for a moment as if trying to decide whether to answer. Then he turned and walked away. Outside, a small crowd had gathered near the sidewalk. Two young men were filming with their phones. A woman in scrubs yelled something about knowing her rights. The air buzzed with tension, the kind you could feel in your teeth. The older officer got into the driver's seat, glanced at her in the mirror. "You should have just kept quiet." Tamika looked him dead in the eye. "You should have just done your job right." She turned slightly, as much as the cuffs allowed. "Can I use my phone or not?" He hesitated, then he muttered, "Make it quick." He reached around and dropped the phone into her lap. Without unlocking the cuffs, she maneuvered it awkwardly, twisting to tap the screen with the side of her thumb. Two quick swipes, one number. It rang twice to make her. The voice was sharp, alert. "Byron, I'm cuffed in the back of a police car in Ganana. They say I'm impersonating military. I showed ID. They don't care." There was a pause. "Then who's the arresting officer?" "I don't know yet. No badge names shown. Two of them white SUV. Sinclair Station off Morse. I'm 5 minutes out. I'm calling command. Keep the line open." The call went quiet, but she didn't hang up. The older officer looked at her through the mirror again. "Who was that? Your lawyer?" She didn't answer. Outside, the younger cop walked back toward the cruiser, now visibly agitated. "We're getting heat out here," he muttered to his partner. "Somebody's already posted video. It's hitting Facebook." "I said 5 minutes." Byron's voice came again. "You hear me?" "I hear you." The younger cop leaned into the window. "Who's Byron?" "Your boyfriend." Tamika raised an eyebrow. "Try Colonel Byron, Keene 3rd Battalion Logistics. You're about to learn his name." "Real well." That hit differently. The cop's jaw moved slightly. He stepped back, uncertain now. The energy was changing. More people were recording. A car honked as it passed. The woman in scrubs yelled again, this time at the cop. "She's military, idiots." But the officers didn't move fast enough. And to make the clock was ticking on whether this ended quietly or publicly. Colonel Byron Keene hadn't slept much the night before. That morning, he'd been at his desk, early, halfway through his first cup of black coffee, when his goddaughter's call came through. He recognized the tone in her voice immediately. Not fear, not panic, but control. Controlled anger, controlled humiliation. Byron wasn't just a ranking officer, he was the kind of man who made things move when others stalled. Born in Dayton, hardened by years in deployments and bureaucratic politics, he'd seen systems work, and he'd seen them break people. He wasn't about to let it break Tamika. He tossed the coffee aside. grabbed his car keys, and dialed on Bluetooth. As he pulled out of the lot, dispatch, "This is Colonel Byron Keene. I need to confirm the location of officers Dorsey and Lynchford. I believe they've detained a service member at a gas station off Morse Road." There was hesitation on the other end. "Sir, we don't typically—" "I'm not asking for typical. I'm requesting verification of an incident involving one of my logistics officers in uniform reportedly accused of impersonating military personnel." The line went quiet. "We'll check and update you, sir." "Good. You've got 2 minutes." Byron's next call was to a buddy in the city council. "Pull traffic cams and see if there's a cruiser sitting near the Sinclair on Morse. I need confirmation now." Meanwhile, back in the cruiser, Tamika sat still. Her phone call hadn't ended. The line remained open. She wanted them to know someone was listening. "You still with me?" Byron asked again, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here," she said. "Crowds growing. People are filming. Stay where you are. Don't move. Don't speak. Let them bury themselves. Too late for that." She glanced up at the younger officer, who was pacing now. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a situation escalating. Civilian interference. Requesting backup." Tamika laughed under her breath. "Backup for what?" "One woman in cuffs." The comment didn't go unnoticed. The younger officer snapped. "You need to watch your mouth, lady, or what? You'll press harder on the cuffs." The older officer interjected from the front. "You're not helping yourself. I'm not here to help you feel better about what you've done." She shot back. Byron's voice came back, strong but trying to conceal himself. "Now I've had 3 calls, including to public affairs vids coming in. It's already moving." And it was at that very time someone had uploaded a 90-second clip on Twitter. It featured Tamika being handcuffed in uniform while trying to explain herself. Her calm voice contrasted harshly with the officer's tone. It was already being retweeted by local journalists inside a newsroom across Columbus. A young editor named Raina Cortez noticed it while searching for leads. She scowled as she hit play, and then took the phone. "Yes, there is a developing situation close to Morse Road. A uniformed military woman in handcuffs. You want me to go interview, verify that she is still present." Returning to the petrol station, more vehicles had arrived, but nobody was going. A woman wearing a red sweatshirt yelled, "I downloaded the entire thing to my phone." She claimed to be in the military. At last, the young cop turned to face the elder one. "We made a mistake. We need to have thoroughly examined her credentials. We can no longer walk it back." Tamika looked in the direction. "You believed it? I'm just having fun in this uniform." The ensuing quiet was more solemn compared to her wrist cuffs. A brand new police SUV entered the parking lot. A middle-aged black man was escorted away by a lieutenant with no expression in a buzz cut. He avoided going forward to the audience. He proceeded directly to the cruiser. He gave the window a tap. "Sergeant Drury." She looked up with amazement. "Indeed, Colonel Keene has notified me," and looked over the video in real time. "We're fixing this right now." He unlocked the door by himself and cautiously removed her handcuffs. "On this department behalf, I'm sorry." Tamika didn't speak up immediately. She rose slowly, stroked her wrists. "I turned to face the 2 police officers who had handcuffed her. "You were not sorry." Flatly, she said. "You were just caught." However, it wasn't the end of the apologies. It marked the beginning of something much more significant, and Tamika was aware of it. By the time of the arrival of Colonel Keene at the Sinclair station, the scene had already been cleared by the sitting next to her RV, forearms crossed, jaw clenched. Her duffel bag remained undamaged in the back seat. The pumps had been out of commission for a while. She hadn't moved though. Without saying anything, Byron got out of his automobile. They looked each other in the eye, and for a brief, they didn't communicate. Then he nodded slightly, not relief, not approbation, but recognition. She had defended herself. Are you all right? Silently, he inquired. Yes, she nodded. Simply insane. Use it across the street. A local reporter was preparing a microphone, attempting to capture witnesses before they dispersed. One of the onlookers, the scrub-clad woman, was already providing a thorough explanation. Holding a phone, in uniform, they handcuffed. She spoke into the microphone, didn't even pose inquiries. She informed them that she's an identification, and they continued to smash her into her own vehicle, as if she were lying. The earlier video clip reached more than 60,000 views. In 2 hours, it was at 180,000 by lunchtime, and the comments weren't subtle. How does this still happen? They saw a black woman in uniform, and still didn't believe her. Fire them both. Byron was already 2 steps ahead. He had emailed the city's Office of Police Oversight attaching both the civilian footage and the body cam videos acquired through backcheck. He cited the base commander, the city attorney, and the local military liaison officer. The footage didn't lie. It showed Tamika calmly stating her name, providing credentials, inquiring if she was being detained. The younger cop barely glanced at her ID before turning her around. No warning, no confirmation, but worse, with a few seconds caught on the body cam. After she was cuffed, when the cops thought their audio was muted, the younger one had said, "You suppose she's one of those fake vets? They've been plucking that stuff all year." The older one chuckled. "Read or not, she had an attitude to let her cool off in the car." Byron glanced at the television as the footage played. Then he said out loud to no one fools that afternoon, the police agency convened a private internal meeting. The pair of officers, both Lynchford and Dorsey, were put on administrative leave, awaiting examination. The public relations representative wanted to make a comment right away. The chief didn't agree. Let it calm down soon. This time, no one will respond. Meanwhile, back on the base, already, word had gotten out. The other reservists weren't shocked by Tamika. Simmering beneath the surface was anger, not loud, but steady. "It's been 15 years since I was," a sergeant informed another. "Never received a handcuff while in uniform. I wonder why that is." Tamika was reluctant to talk in front of others. She disregarded requests for interviews and banned unidentified numbers. She wasn't trying to make headlines. She didn't require praise. She desired responsibility. That evening, Byron gave another call. "Are you certain you don't want to make a statement?" She sat on her sofa, remaining in uniform. "No, the video speaks for itself." He was silent for a while, then declared that they would spin it. "Attempt to portray you as combative. Let them try that evening," she moaned. One of the cops, a local paper, received an off-the-record comment from Linford. He asserted this had been an exaggerated occurrence, and Tamika inflamed the conflict by defying simple orders. By the following morning, it backfired. Longer views and more material were released. A retired Air Force major with superior audio even left a comment during a live broadcast. Had that woman been Caucasian, those handcuffs would not have been in their vicinity. The situation was exacerbated by the department's silence. However, decisions were being taken behind the scenes, and they would alter both of their paths. The careers of officers, both of them did not see. Approaching by Friday morning, the footage had reached every feature outlet in Ohio. It was no longer just a local incident. It was a headline, the kind that opened morning broadcasts. and took over social media timelines. Army reservist wrongfully detained in uniform. Body cam footage. Sparks, outrage in Guyana. Woman in camo cuffed at pump. What went wrong? The Sinclair station where it happened had become a landmark overnight news. Vans lined the street. Reporters asked passers-by if they'd seen anything, if they'd heard of her, if they thought the officers had gone too far inside. Bakery down the block. People argued over coffee. She showed ID that should have ended. Cops get calls like that all the time. Maybe they were just being cautious. You can't caution someone into the back of a cruiser with cuffs, not in uniform at her home, to make her stay quiet. Hadn't stopped ringing. Some calls were from reporters, some from strangers offering support, and a few ugly ones, telling her she should have complied, or accusing her of pulling the race card. She let most of them go to voicemail, but she read every message from fellow service members. One said, "I've served 22. Never imagined I'd have to warn my daughter that even a uniform won't protect her." Another, "You did. Many of us couldn't." She stood up while sitting still. That one stayed with her. Meanwhile, the department scrambled. The mayor called an emergency press briefing. He stood stiffly beside the police chief and mumbled through a prepared statement, "This city does not tolerate profiling or misconduct of any kind. We have launched an internal review. We are in communication with military leadership and will address the matter with full transparency." But transparency came late that afternoon. The Office of Police Oversight released a preliminary review, confirming that both officers had failed to follow standard verification procedures. More damning was their disregard for protocol involving military personnel. It was written clearly in their manual procedures. Both officers had signed off on during training. Community groups rallied outside City Hall. Signs read, "Cuffed for serving uniform protection. Justice for Sergeant Drury." Tamika's name was now everywhere, even though she hadn't spoken to a single reporter, had become a symbol not because she asked for it but because people saw themselves in her at a nearby high school. A teacher paused her government class and played the footage. "Watch this closely," she said. "Then tell me what you see. Not just what happened but why it happened. And why." Happening back at the station, the chief was under pressure. "We need to act," his deputy said. "We've got every local outlet breathing down our necks, plus 2 national networks looking to pick it up. Do we fire them now, or after the review fire them?" Yesterday, the deputy muttered inside a quiet meeting room. Officers, Dorsey and Linford, were brought in separately. Each was told the same thing: "You're being placed on immediate unpaid suspension pending termination for conduct violations, failure to follow identification protocol, and unprofessional conduct." Dorsey tried to argue, claimed he feared she was a threat. She was unarmed. The board member replied in uniform with ID. "And you cuffed her." Linford didn't argue. He sat down, said nothing, and signed the form. When news broke that the officers had been removed, reactions poured in. Some cheered, some called it overdue. A small segment defended the officers, saying they did their job under pressure, but the majority saw it for what it was: a wrong that had finally met consequences. At a small gathering that night, veterans lit candles outside the reserve base. They didn't chant, they didn't shout, they just stood there, in silence and support. One of them, an older man in faded fatigues, held a sign that simply read, "We know what she stood for. Do you?" But even with accountability beginning, the question hung in the air: what happens next for Tamika? And what happens next time it's someone Tamika, edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap.
It had been nearly a week since the gas station incident she'd taken.
One day off from drill. Just one. She didn't want people looking at her differently,
Treating her like some victim, some symbol.
She wasn't interested in being anyone's cause. She just wanted her respect back. Her boots were lined up by the door, clean laces tucked. The uniform hanging from the closet looked the same as the one she'd worn that morning, but everything felt heavier now. A letter slid under her door around noon. Not an envelope, just a single sheet folded once. She picked it up. Sergeant Drury, on behalf of the Ghana Police, we extend a formal apology for the actions taken against you. On the morning of March 12th, an internal review has confirmed multiple violations of protocol by officers Dorsey and Linford, both of whom have since been terminated. This letter does not undo what occurred, but it is the first step in our acknowledgement of wrong. It wasn't signed by the chief, just printed with his name, that told her everything she needed to know. A few days later, she was invited to speak at a city council meeting. They wanted a statement, just a few words. She declined politely. She didn't owe them anything. Instead, she drove to the VFW in Reynoldsburg. A few older vets had asked her to stop by. Nothing formal, just talk inside. A group of men and women, black, white, Latino, sat quietly at folding tables drinking black coffee and listening. Tamika kept her voice steady. I didn't want this. I just wanted gas and a protein bar, but I couldn't ignore
it.
Eat. Not because I was angry, but because I know there are kids watching, and I can't let them think. Silence is the answer. Someone clapped slowly. Then more joined in, but she held up her hand. I don't want applause. I want change. Back at City Hall, change came quietly. The department issued new guidelines for handling service members, including mandatory ID verification steps and required retraining on racial bias. A new liaison position was created between the department and the nearest reserve base. Small steps, but they happened. One of the younger officers at the precinct, Officer Reeves, sent her a message through the liaison. I wasn't on shift that day, but I watched the video 10 times. I'm sorry for how they treated you. I'm going to do better. Tamika read it twice before forwarding it to Byron. He replied with one word, progress. But progress didn't erase everything at her local grocery store. A woman whispered to her husband in the next aisle, "That's the soldier who was on the news." Some looked at her like a hero, others with judgment, like she'd stirred the pot too hard. She didn't react, just kept walking. One Saturday morning she ran into the woman in scrubs from the gas station. The woman introduced herself as Patrice. I just want you to know, Patrice said, you weren't alone that day. I saw it. I got your back. Tamika smiled. For the first time in days. Thanks, that matters. Byron visited the following week. They sat on the porch eating barbecue and watching the sun dip behind the trees. You did good, he said, biting into a rye bean. I didn't do anything special, she replied. Exactly. He nodded. That's what makes it powerful. She looked out at the street, quiet and still, and finally let herself breathe. But even with justice, so the weight of it all hadn't lifted completely, because Tamika knew this wasn't about her alone. It never had been. It didn't end with the apology or the firings, or the headlines. Those things came and went, but the conversation stayed in quiet circles and family kitchens and training rooms where officers sat through new videos and listened to new instructors, telling them what they should have known all along. For Tamika, life picked back up. Drill weekends, work errands, the usual, but something had shifted. People treat her differently, some with little more caution, others with open admiration, a few with thinly disguised resentment. She didn't spend time sorting them out. What mattered most came in the form of a single envelope that arrived. 2 weeks later, no return address inside, was a letter from a young woman named Darla Reynolds, a 19-year-old, who had just enlisted in the Army Reserve, and had seen the video online. "I didn't think I could do this," Darla wrote. "I've always worried about how I'd be seen if people would question me, if they'd think I didn't belong. But I saw you calm, proud, strong, and I knew I could do it too. Thank you for wearing that uniform, and not backing down." Tamika held the letter for a long time. She'd never set out to inspire anyone. She just didn't want to be humiliated, without reason. But maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not a big speech or a protest, but standing firm when someone's trying to erase you with a single gesture. Her story wasn't one of violence or shouting matches. It was about silence being broken, in the right moment, by the right voice. That one phone call, calm, precise, and made under pressure, had changed everything. Colonel Keene, always blunt, summed it up best when they met again. "For lunch, you didn't panic, you didn't yell, you let them expose themselves. That's why they lost." Tamika nodded. "Yeah, but they'll try." "It was someone else, somewhere else probably," he said, setting down his fork. "But the difference now is people are watching." He was right. The gas station had new cameras. The police department now required extra training before officers could return to active patrol. Community liaisons were meeting monthly with local military reps to talk through issues before they became news stories, and to make her, she stayed quiet publicly, but never silent privately. She wrote letters to other service members who reached out. She spoke at small veteran events. She answered every message from young recruits asking how to carry themselves under pressure. But she also made time for herself. She got back to running. She went on road trips again. She visited her godmother in Cincinnati, and cooked gumbo for a group of kids who'd never tasted this before. Because surviving a moment like that doesn't mean you live in it forever. You heal, you grow, you move forward. And sometimes you hold the system accountable, not by raising your voice, but by refusing to be dismissed. For every person who said, "That's just how things are," to make a story quietly replied, "They don't have to be, not if you know who to call, not if you stand your ground, not if you remember who you are with or without the uniform." If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the importance of being seen, respected, and heard, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, speak about it, and most importantly, subscribe for more stories that matter, stories that remind us what quiet courage really looks like.